Hi there. Come on in. Settle down. Take a breath. And let's step back softly into the 1300s, one of my favorite centuries. The heather is swaying in the highlands. The air is still. And for now, Scotland is at peace. But that peace won't last very long. Tonight, we're going to whisper our way through the Second War of Scottish Independence. A quieter war than normal, but this one was just as determined, because freedom, once tasted, wasn't easily forgotten. We have another episode on the First War of Scottish Independence, but this is the Second War of Scottish Independence. So, we're going to begin precisely in the year 1329. 1329. Scotland has a great warrior king. His name is Robert the Bruce, and he died. During his reign, there were many years of brutal fighting, but also a free kingdom. His body is buried at Dunfermline Abbey. I'm probably saying that wrong. But his heart, as he wished, was carried to the Holy Land. Well, towards the Holy Land. It won't get there, though. We won't tell him that, but it won't get there. His son, David, becomes the king. But David is just a child. He's only 5 years old. So Scotland rests, and its enemies wait. So now we're going to move across the border into England, where a new king rules. Edward III. Everybody knows Edward III. He's amazing. He's young. He's proud. And he's looking for a way to remind Scotland, who once held the leash over them. That's England. Now that Robert the Bruce is dead, the English can rise up a new challenger in Scotland on England's behalf. His name you might be familiar with, Edward Balliol. He's the son of John Balliol, the puppet king from the last war of Scottish independence. The English crown helps Balliol gather exiled Scottish nobles. These are men who have lost their land and titles. That was when Robert the Bruce won. He took away their land and their titles. So together, they're back, and they form an army. And quietly, they march north. They march north from England to Scotland. Now, in 1332, Edward Balliol and his allies land in Fife. I'm not very good at pronouncing some of these names. But they just have a few hundred men with them. They're not a huge army, but not super small either. And they strike fast. They strike really, really fast. Scotland is still led by nobles guarding that tiny little boy, David. So they're caught off guard. At the Battle of Dublin Moor, Balliol's smaller force, believe it or not, the smaller force defeats the Scots, and they have devastating precision. This is quite surprising. We have thousands of Scottish nobles killed. Nobles, knights, even clergy are killed. Those are the guys who work in the churches. And soon after, Edward Balliol crowns himself King of the Scots. That's kind of crazy. But his crown is uneasy. Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown, and it sits very loosely on his head. Most of Scotland doesn't support him. That's not really surprising. His rule depends on English swords backing him and supporting him. The real goal becomes clear when Edward III sends open support for him from England. These are really squeaky gloves. I kind of like that. And now England doesn't just want Balliol on the throne. They want Scotland as a vassal state, They want Scotland under its thumb. But the Scottish haven't forgotten the last time that happened, and they rise up against Edward III taking over Scotland again. So, here we are. The Scottish resistance grows. It's quiet at first, and then it grows and grows and grows and grows. It grows, and it gets bigger and louder, and they force Balliol from the Scottish throne, and they make him flee. Now David, still a child, is sent all the way to France, for safety. And for a while, nobody really rules Scotland. Scotland isn't totally ruling Scotland. Wow, that's really squeaky. And England isn't totally ruling Scotland. It's kind of a dance of sieges and skirmishes and little battles and shifting loyalties and betrayals and political alliances back and forth. But Balliol starts taking town after town after town, with English help, of course. But every time he takes a town, it's met with resistance, naturally. And we start to have Scottish leaders emerge from the resistance. And you hear Andrew Murray is one of them, and they start leading the fight. And ordinary Scots start hiding and harboring and helping those leaders. This turns out to be not really a war of great epic battles, but more kind of the long haul, a long endurance kind of war. For 9 years, young David lives in exile. He's safe, but he wants to return. I mean, who wouldn't? So, in 1341, at the age of 17, he finally does. He finally returns to Scotland. He steps on shore in Scotland, and he's not really a boy, but he's pretty much an adult by medieval standards. He's also a king, the King of Scotland, and he begins to lead Scotland again in the resistance. And the resistance builds with David at the front. He's at the front. But all does not go well. Peace doesn't come easily. 2 years later, he decides to invade England, hoping to pressure Edward III. Edward III at this time is busy fighting in France, so it seems like a good time to invade England. But it doesn't go well. It does not go well. At the Battle of Neville's Cross, David is wounded and captured. Scotland once again is without a king. This story is not super straightforward about Hero King coming back and claiming his throne. So, but stick with me, we're almost done. David remains a prisoner, a captive of war for 11 years. 11 years, can you imagine that? 11 years. Scotland is governing itself, but it's uneasy. It's not super smooth going without a king. Balliol is still around, but he doesn't have as much support as he used to. Now, Edward the Squeaky King, Edward III, he's still focused on his French wars even after 11 years. And he's kind of like, I'm sick of this Scottish business. So, in 1356, Balliol resigns his claim to the Scottish throne. He's sick of this Scottish business too. He fades into history. And 2 years later, things still have to be resolved, and a deal is made. David is ransomed back to Scotland. Can you imagine So what? That's 13 years captured. A king captured in prison. A king in prison for 13 years. So he returns. There's a sum paid for his ransom. He returns. He's older. He's quieter. And now he's not so war hungry. He's eager to keep the peace. But he dies in 1371. And when he dies, the house of Bruce dies with him. But the dream is still there. Scotland is still a free kingdom. It's not under English rule. It's weary, but it's still standing. So, for now, that's what we're going to end our tale of the Second Scottish War of Independence. It's not as famous as the first. There's no William Wallace in this one, but it's still important to Scottish history. And it still sets the stage for tensions yet to come in Scottish history, wars with England, before the countries united under James I in, was it 1604, 1607? James I, who takes the English throne after Queen Elizabeth dies, but he's also the King of Scotland, so now he's the king of both, and it's united. But even then, there's still more tension, so let's leave it here. I hope you learned something interesting. Leave a comment if you want to hear about a different war or a different king or period of history.